Waters, PhD, worked in Haiti for 31 years. During that time, he worked with Vodou priests in his research area and has met with Max Beauvoir, who, until his death, held the title of Supreme Servitor, or Supreme Servant, and was recognized around the world as one of the foremost experts in Vodou. So let's give a great big, a warm UCOT welcome to Dr. Bill Waters.
No, I don't think so. Everything. I want to thank four people or four groups. First, Joe for assisting in getting the slideshow to work. It was a little bit of a process. And I'd like to thank Rachel for videotaping it. And I'd like to thank my wife for volunteering me to do this. I'm not a speaker, and I'd like to thank you as members of the audience today for coming and listening to what it is that I have to say. First, you can see that there's not an altar, but there is a table with a plant. The plant came from Haiti. It came from the island of Ile Vache. It sounds romantic, but it means island of the cow. And Virginia and I went on a vacation there a few years ago, and she took a little cutting, and it grows profusely. And then the two bottles are of a particular Vodou loa, or spirit. You can see that there's a Catholic lithograph on there. Boy, that's a bright light. And it's Saint Isidore or Saint San Isidro, or in Haiti it's called Azaka, Kozenzaka. It's the spirit of agriculture. And you can come up and look at this afterwards, but they have veves, or ground drawings, and this is the veve of that particular spirit. And these are the three colors that particular spirit works with. And these spirits have days of the week that are associated with them. And with Azaka, it's Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. How they come up with those particular days, I'm not sure. But if you could, I will come visit you in a coconut. That will be explained later on. You have to come up with a catchy title, right? And so this is what I'm going to talk about today, the importance of understanding ethnospace, is that a term anybody knows? It's a term that we all should know, and I'll explain why. What Vodou is not what Vodou is, the relationship between Vodou death and life, and the interdependency between life and death. That's the key to understanding Vodou is life and death, because it's that symbiotic relationship between the two. And the Loa and what they represent in the moving parts of Vodou. And most of it's going to be slides, so you'll be able to see visual while I'm talking about them, and I think that helps quite a bit. My wife and I went to Santa Fe yesterday to pick up some plants, and on the way back we stopped at Velarde, little town on the way. Most of you probably have stopped there, and have you gotten produce from the little fruit stand? Do you know that they have been in that location for 15 generations, for 421 years? Think of that. They were there starting in 1598. I mean, the original land grant, Spanish land grant, right? And that's what ethnosphere is about cultures. And it's not about that culture in particular, but it's about cultures around the world, and the languages that are spoken. There are over 7,000 languages spoken, but half of those languages are not being transferred to their children. And every 2 weeks approximately, an elder from one of those cultures, who may be the last speaker of that culture, dies. And with that individual goes the ceremonies, obviously the language, and all the cultural heritage are a large part of it, in part because it's all passed on through language. And you look at what we have in this area, Taos Pueblo, there 1,000 years. The different cultural entities that we have here, the penitentes that have been here, and how that's changed over time. the crypto Jews and what they represent. This is a unique place, I think most of us recognize that. But there are these cultures all around the world that are disappearing at a rapid rate. We think about the biosphere, plants and animals dying. We hear about that all the time, but we don't hear about cultures dying. And with that goes that diversity that keeps us whole. And out of there's only like 68 languages that are really spoken by by a large group of people. And within 2 generations, over half of the languages will be gone. And what are we left with? You know, we're coming into times of some pretty stark, a pretty stark future, but we won't have that cultural knowledge to fall back on and how to deal with things. Anyway, I think it's pretty important to understand that Vodou is in Haiti. Creole is not going away, but one of the things that's happening is education's happening. More and more people, young people are getting educated, they're moving into the cities, and then there's going to be that disconnect between the countryside, where Vodou is good and strong, and into the city, where it's a lot more compartmentalized. So that is even going to run into some problems down the road. And I will say, if you have any questions while I'm talking, please just, ask at that time, because you may not remember as at the end of the presentation. What Vodou is not? It is not dolls like this, where you stick pins into. You see them in the movies where people are, agitating and falling down and dying and that kind of stuff. This is a Hollywood invention, but there are true voodoo dolls, and this is a voodoo doll and you'll see one on an altar as I go through the slides. But this is used. This one particular doll is attached to a sandal. If you're in a relationship and you want to break that relationship off, you take the doll, wrap it with sisal and to a sandal, and you take it to the cemetery, and you tell your partner where their lot lies, and when they see that in the cemetery, it means that the relationship is dead. So, not that the person's dead, but the relationship is finished. And you have to remember that most of the wedding or the marriages are common law. There's not a huge structure within the countryside, and that's where voodoo comes into play. You'll hear that voodoo is cannibalism, it's child sacrifice, it's human sacrifice. That's all made up of people who are Hollywood movie producers, but it came on early on in the early 1800s by people who hated blacks, who hated Africans. And so anything that they could do to make up stories about voodoo, about Haiti, they would do so. It was all ways to diminish the Haitian people and the religion. Early on, voodoo was, even though it was the religion that won Haitians their freedom from France, when the first Haitian Constitution was written, it was kept out. It was a forbidden religion. Catholicism was the religion, the official religion. It wasn't until 1987 when Jean-Bertrand Aristide, one of the first democratically elected presidents, put voodoo back in as a religion, because over 90% of the population practiced this religion. During the American occupation from 1915 to 1934, American servicemen would write novels about Haiti, and these became very popular, and movie scripts were written from them. And it was all about naked savages, dancing without clothes and just out of control, not understanding the true context of what voodoo is and what possession is. These things still continue. There were anti-superstitious campaigns that were brought on by the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church was the first dominant religion, but now the Protestant religions are there, and they're doing much the same. They'll go into the voodoo temples, and they'll take the drums and burn them, burn all of the artifacts that people work with. So it's still an ongoing kind of thing. Several of the services that I was involved with are supposed to be drums, but there were no drums. Why? Because they didn't want to telegraph what they were doing. So things have kind of gone into secret. It used to be done anytime, day or night. Now mostly they're done at nighttime because it's kept in private and secrecy. So there's still a huge problem in Haiti with having the acceptance of voodoo. I should say, I didn't go there to study voodoo. I went there to look at agricultural practices. And there was a male nurse there, American male nurse, who said, if you want to understand Haiti, you have to understand voodoo. He said, there's a guy up the road, T-Pop, you need to go talk to him. And my cultural guide is related to T-Pop's wife, and so he did the introduction. And there began a relationship that lasted for 31 years. And it was the most peaceful, passive household that I've ever visited in Haiti. And so it's an interesting religion. What is voodoo? It came from West Africa. It came from Dahomey, which is now Benin, Congo, and Nigeria. It's a system that was brought with the slave population. So when you're bringing over a population, you're not bringing over an entire religion. You're bringing bits and pieces of it. And so that's why it was reimagined in Haiti with the Haitian experience, with strong connections to West Africa. So a lot of the spirits are not from Africa. They are unique to Haiti. What does the term mean? It simply means spirit, the Loa, and that's what it is. It's a religion that is based around the spirits. It's the foundation of voodoo theology is that it's there's a pantheon of spirits, and there's one Godhead, and these spirits are intermediaries that work between humans and God. God is too important to listen to your individual needs, and so you talk to the spirits, and the spirits take that forward. It's a relationship between people, nature, and the supernatural forces. As in most religions, it's there to create order out of chaos. It renders the mysterious understandable. It's a democratic religion in that not only do they have direct access to the spirit realm, but actually God enters into their body during when possession takes place. They have a moral code, and it's to elevate and celebrate human life. There's no written text. There's no central, because it's an oral tradition, right? It's become more. There are linguists who have worked and begin to really identify a standard Creole, and there are texts written now, and it's being taught in schools. It used to be all in French, which the students didn't understand. There are a few traditional centers that are now starting to pop up, but voodoo transfers from one generation to the next, from one person. It's passed. Well, we'll get that because there's a whole period of this is where this death takes place, and how it's related to the living. But it's passed from generation to generation, as most things are. There's no written text, but there's a uniformity from east to west, north to south in Haiti. So if you walk into a voodoo ceremony, you're going to know what's going on, which is pretty remarkable because these people don't have connections north, south, east, west. People rarely visit the capital city. People rarely go outside their little zone. So to have this uniformity, I think, says something about the integrity of the religion. I talked about the Catholic saints, and a lot of people say there's a syncretic relationship that's going on. What I say is that early on, every slave was baptized, right? And so they all became Catholic, but they looked at the saints and said, that's Dambala, that's Azaka, that's Agwe, that's Lasarine. They looked at the saints and they saw characteristics that were there. It's just like St. Patrick, who's no longer a saint, I guess, but the snakes were around his feet. Well, in Voodoo you have Dambala, the serpent. And so they took St. Patrick and said, they used all of his iconography, and they said, this is now Dambala. And that was in order simply for them to be able to practice their religion. Okay, this gets a little complicated. This is about the relationship between voodoo death, life, and the interdependency. There are several different parts of the soul. And first is a star, étoile. It has no connection. It doesn't reside in the body. It obviously resides in the sky. It resembles a calabash or a gourd, and it is viewed as carrying the hopes and the order of events of the next life for the soul. So it's this kind of, and not everybody believes. I'm going to go through these 5 different steps, and not everybody is in agreement with these different steps. The next is the body itself, which will be returned to death, to the earth right after death. There's no embalming, so the death has to happen within the first 24 hours. Then there's the spirit of the flesh that allows the body to function, and it's seen as a gift of God, and it stops functioning at the time of death. The next is the petit bon ange, or the little guardian angel, and this is there's cosmic life in everything that's alive, and this is what connects, the energy for everything. And during the time that the person is alive, the petit bon ange keeps the body aware of what's going on, keeps it healthy, and keeps the evil spirits away. It is also the source of human consciousness and morality. And it distinguishes between good and evil and helps the person to make good choices. But at the last breath that the person takes, that little angel is expelled and joins all the cosmic energy up in the cosmos. And there it gives a reaccounting of its life to God. That's the one time that God has an interaction. And it exists is cosmic energy in the heavens, and it is no longer interacting with the living. The most important part of the soul is the gros bon ange, or the big guardian angel. And this is really where the personality of the person comes. It has the ability to wander away at night times, and it visits both living and past relatives. And shortly after death, this is the spirit that is sent back to Africa. And Africa, not to the continent, but all things African go to what they call the Great Water Abyss. It's Guinea, and it's an underground body of water where all these spirits reside. And the gros bon ange, everybody has one of these things. So anybody here, all Unitarians have this. And at time of possession, that's what is dissipated, and the spirits, the Loa that have gone underneath the earth, they come back in a unified force, and that's what enters into your body. Remember, this large guardian angel can wander away, and it has to be away during the time of possession. And I'll talk more about that. And the last, which gets into the title of the story, is the met tete, or the master of the head. And this is the first time that a person is visited. I hate to use the word possession because that brings up all kinds of negative connotations. The first time a person is visited by a Loa, that's typically the head Loa. That's going to be the Loa that resides with the person throughout his or her entire life. And upon death, that is what is extracted and then sent into a family member. Okay, if you could switch the slide. No, other way. This is obviously, has anybody been to Haiti? Joe has, I know. He's been up way up north. Who else? Yeah.
We went together.
And that's really not Haiti. It's a little part of the island way up in here, and it's kind of a resort area for the cruise ships. My time was spent in a little tiny village here called Boisdon, passing through the grove of human trees. And then I worked in the Port-au-Prince area. That's where Max Beauvoir that's where his home for his voodoo temple was. Next slide, sweetie. This is called a dissonné. This is at the time of death. This is a famous painting. It's actually in a museum in Iowa, Davenport, Iowa, of all places. You just never know. There was a doctor there who fell in love with Haiti and went and collected all of this artwork and then donated it to the museum. But this is the removal of the head loa. This is a dissonné where this is a woman who has passed away. This is the voodoo priest. This is a Laplace. There are two of them. And you can see he's taken the sword and he's touched to her head. And it immediately is transferred from her into her. And so she now has the head loa in her head. That's how easy, because these things are invisible, right? They're not a tangible kind of thing. Next slide. This is Max Beauvoir. I think and he was made, the head of voodoo in Haiti. He is the same thing as the Pope. To have an audience with him is pretty rare. When he was made the head voodoo person in Haiti, this is a potomidon or a centropost. That's how the spirits come into the world once they've left. And he was had to take down his potomidon and put on a living tree. And around the center part is two snakes with an egg, which is the wisdom and knowledge. So but he had a different way of thinking. When we met with him, I met with him twice. He said that when a person dies, they don't die once, they die 18 times. They live 9 times as a female, 9 times as a male. He said our bodies are like pieces of Swiss cheese. That every time there's a death that takes place, there's a transfer of that knowledge. One hole is filled up. When those 18 holes are filled up, that's when the real voodoo death takes place. He was Western educated. He was living in New York City and working for Cornell University, has several patents out. And he was called home by his grandfather. His grandfather was a Hugon or a voodoo priest and was dying. So he was surrounded, the grandfather was surrounded by 30 or so grandchildren, nephews and nieces and things like that. And he just looked at Max Beauvoir and said, "You're the one. You're the chosen one." So when he died, like in that Dissonné painting, the head loa went right into Max Beauvoir, and he turned his back on the West and has resided in Haiti ever since. But I wanted my students to be able to talk to somebody who could converse with them in English instead of having me translate back and forth, so they could get it straight from the source. Next slide. Nope. This is the death of an individual. I didn't ask to take the pictures of the death. They knew that I was there studying, and they wanted me to. They actually took the lid off of the coffin and pulled me up there and said, "Take a picture, take a picture." And why is this important? It's important because when the body dies, they want it to be happy. They want it to return to the earth. They don't want it to come back to visit them. And so one of the things that they do is they, first of all, you can't see very well because this was back in the days before digital cameras, so everything was 35 millimeter. But you can see that the hands are tied together. That's so the individual can't get up and put on their shoes. There's cotton stuck up the nose, and so they can't smell food cooking. There's cotton stuck in the ears, so they can't hear the living having a good time. There's a cross put on his forehead, which is the crossroads between the known and the unknown, the visible, the invisible. Everything is taken out of his pocket, so this happens to be so he can't get in there looking for things. he is buried with a little pouch of sesame seeds. Why? Because they're small and there's lots of them. And he's going to be occupied counting those sesame seeds, and he's going to lose count. So he's got to start all over again. So this will be an ongoing kind of a process. Next slide.
So what's there on what are those black fingers?
Like along here,
Those three things.
hands of the family that are. And the last thing that they do before the body is buried is that this is the family of the deceased. And they're all walking mournfully. Next slide. They walk to the edge of the property, to the property line. And this is escorting the person to the end of the property line. Next slide. And then it's joyous. They turn around and they're happy. They're shouting, and then what they're doing is they're letting the deceased know that they're okay, that they're sad that the individual has passed, but they're going to be okay without them. They want them to go and be in peace. And
excuse me, I remember when the earthquakes happened in Haiti, there was great distress because they could not properly bury the dead.
well, that's across the board, whether you're a voodoo believer or not. There are so many. Well, there are 310,000 people died, right? And it's not where you could get to the bodies immediately, and so they're buried in mass graves. And that brings up an interesting point, because you had several Christian denominations say that the reason that there was an earthquake in Haiti was because of voodoo. They made a deal with the devil back in 1791, when they said that they got together in a place called Boacaima, and it was a voodoo priestess, a mambo, who got the people together and said, we're going to overthrow the French. And so people like Pat Robertson, he was a big proponent of that. We knew a pastor in Lincoln, Nebraska, a Lutheran church. I don't know what branch, but and he would be in Haiti, and he would get out of the balcony with his Bible and, "Out you devil! Out you devil!" Just shouting that, because he would hear drums in the background, not having any understanding of what was taking place, looking at the world through his small vantage point, and not taking the world at large, not looking at it from an ethnosphere, not looking at the diversity and what we gain from having a plethora of beliefs. And so the next slide. This is, okay, I've told that, the large guardian angel is taken out of the head and it's sent under the earth. And it resides in this body of water. And after this collective energy sits there of all these deceased that are coming into this area, there's enough energy that can form into a loa, into a spirit. Individual big guardian angels don't have enough power or energy to do that. So they sit and they build up energy. And then when they're called back to come to a service, this is what this represents up here, is the energy force going back up into the world of the living during a voodoo ceremony. You can see that there are squiggly lines in there. That represents the great water abyss, or Guinea. That's where the spirit resides. The stars, we've already spoken about what the stars represent. And in this painting, they're affiliated with the two snakes, which are Dambala. One is Dambala himself, and the other one is Dambala Awedo, which is his wife. She is also the guardian spirit of waterways in the world of the living. She's represented by a rainbow. You can kind of see in here, there are two plant-like objects. Those are trees. And those represent the Poto Midon, which is how the voodoo spirits arrive in the New World. They have to have some kind of pathway. The energy just doesn't flow from down below to up above. It has to have a pathway. And that's why most voodoo ceremonies have a Poto Midon, a center post which the dancers dance around. That's how the spirit enters into the world of the living. And they give the spirits, a human face because it doesn't have any representation. So they have to make sense and order out of it. So they give it a semi-human form. Next. This is the young man who said, "I will visit you in a coconut." And this is a dark enough picture, it's hard to see him, but he was inside the voodoo temple when I went to visit, and he was there very distraught because his brother had just died, and the spirit had been transferred into him. And so we were talking, and he said, "I'm going to come visit you." And I said, "Well, how are you going to come visit me? You don't have a passport." "Oh, I don't need a passport." I said, "But you don't have money for a plane ticket." "I don't need a plane ticket." I said, "Well, how are you going to come visit me?" "I'm going to come visit you in a coconut." And I said, "How will I know when you arrive? I will be a firefly." This was a normal conversation. This was not this kind of esoteric. This was just a matter of fact. "I'm going to come visit you. You're my friend. And this is how I'm going to do it." And, this is the kind of, of energy and power that exists. It's that, and you can't sit there and try to explain it. You have to accept it on face value. And that's one of the problems that we have with all of these traditional religions, is we try to put them into our framework and it doesn't fit. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of you may not be members of other churches now, but you're Unitarians, because things didn't fit.
The person who's dying, is the person who's dying, is he or she able to say to whom the spirit is going to end up?
It goes to a family member, and this happens to be a brother that they were close to.
Which family member? Is that up to the deceased?
It all depends on the closeness, and in fact, the brother didn't live anywhere near. The deceased didn't live anywhere near this brother. He was in another part of Haiti, and I never asked, and I don't know where. But it was important that it always will go to another family member, and it's most likely going to go to somebody that you're close to, because you can trust them. The spirit has to be able to trust, because there's an interdependency. Once you have a spirit within you, like the head, the master of the head, you have to honor that spirit. You have to serve that spirit. If you don't, that spirit is going to become agitated and disappointed with you, and then bad things will happen. You're not going to die, but life won't be as pleasant. So the host, which is this individual, has to be a true host. If somebody comes into your house, what do? You welcome them. You give them something to eat. You give them something to drink. And that's the same kind of thing that is that reciprocal relationship here. The spirit will work for this man, but this man has to work for the spirit.
I think her question, though, is,
does
the deceased decide that this is where it's going to go?
Well, that's what I just said. I said it's going to go to a close family member. And it's, different situations are different. I mean, it's and I don't have all the answers to, but it's going to go to a close relation, close family member.
How do they show that honoring of the spirit?
I'll get to that.
Bill, you may have been saying this a couple of minutes ago, but wouldn't any religion look strange to an outsider?
No.
No?
What did he say?
Would any religion look strange to an outsider?
Wouldn't any religion?
Wouldn't any religion look strange to an outsider? I've lived with, Haitians have no problems with Christianity. They have, and they don't consider Catholics Christians. They don't have any problems with Catholicism. They don't have any problems with Christianity. It's the other way around. Christianity, the Protestant faiths, have a problem with voodoo. And it's the same way when I lived with Native Americans. The Native Americans were able and willing to accept other religions, But the converse was not true. In fact, I got kicked out of the village by an American missionary because I said some things about Sand Creek, and the Christian militia leader who led the charge, he didn't like what I said. And so, no. I have found in most of the cultures that I've lived in, they're very tolerant and accepting of other religions. They're not going to practice it necessarily, but they're not going to denigrate it. And that's just been my, it's like with the earthquake. Instead of looking at sympathy, Pat Robertson in his 700 Club put the blame on voodoo and the 310,000 deaths on a pact with the devil. It's that tolerance is oftentimes not there. It's that acceptance is not there. It's passing judgment. That's been my experience.
So are there deceased who they're not distracted by sesame seeds and their hands come untied, and so they're not fully transitioned to the world of the dead? Is there a recognition of that? Or
There's a recognition of that, and that's why they don't give them their shoes. So if they do come back, they're not making noise as they walk.
So they don't want, okay, so how do they handle that conceptually? The people?
Well, and that they will come back at nighttime. And nighttime is the time of the spirits, of all different kinds of spirits. There are werewolves, loup-garou, all different kinds of images that are out there. Now, I don't even know what time it is. Not much. Nighttime is the time of the spirits, and when Americans went down there early on, they're not accustomed to the heat and humidity in Haiti. And there was no mission house for these missionaries to stay in, right? I lived in a pop-up trailer for the year that I lived there. But they would be housed in Haitian homes. And they would keep the windows open to get fresh air in there. And at nighttime, the Haitians would go and shut them. Walk around the perimeter of the house shutting the windows so the spirits wouldn't come in. And the Americans would open them up again and they would shut them. And it was fine to say, you can't do this because the nighttime is the time of the spirits. You don't go wandering around at nighttime either. Nothing good happens at night. And these spirits are as live as you and I. I tested that out, and I don't know if it was in a positive way or not. I was walking down the street one day. I was there in 1986, 87. There were not very many Americans that were living there full-time. I was the only full-time American in my area. There were part-time missionaries that would be there, and they'd go back to Port-au-Prince and come back. So I was there by myself. So I got to see a lot of things that other people didn't get to see. So I was walking down the road one day, and this man was walking parallel to me, staring at me. And I would say, "Pukisau garime, why are you looking at me?" He'd say, "For I for nothing." But he wouldn't stop. And it's a little unnerving when you're walking and this guy's just staring at you. So I just looked at him. I had a beard, long hair, which is, never. And I looked at him and I just, like this, I'm a loup-garou. I'm a werewolf. And it scared the living daylights out of him. He let out this blood-curdling scream and took off as fast as he could, running, because he thought I was a werewolf. And so I had to chase him down and explain to him who I was and who I knew that he knew. There's a Haitian missionary. And I felt horrible about it. But this is the kind of reality that they existed. And these aren't, wives' tales, fairy tales, tales that are made up. These are actual beliefs that are incorporated into their. Magic is a whole nother realm, and it's written into the Constitution that there are different kinds of bad magic that are practiced. And in the next village to me, there is a man who is supposedly a witch, and I'll try to get to that. And this supposed witch, he's a bokar. A bokar is a bad voodoo priest. He works with both hands under the table so you can't see what he's doing. He had killed presumably had killed three members of a family. And so the last living male member of that family came into his house one night and cut his head off. And it was not seen as a crime. It was seen as taking care of an evil person. So there, and these things still exist in the laws in Haiti.
Are all the spirits negative?
No. The vast majority of them are very positive. It's the Bokar and the Bazango Society, the society that makes zombies. These are the people who are out at night looking for their next victims.
So the good spirits aren't out at night?
No, unless it's at a ceremony, but they're not out wandering. Because they're family oriented. It's almost. This is a painting I bought for Virginia. She loves mermaids, but this is kind of a representation of what voodoo spirits look like. We're going to go through these rapidly. This is a Veve. This is Urzuli, the goddess of love. We know her as the Virgin Mary. Next. This is also the Virgin Mary, but what you can't see, and this is the black Polish saint. I can never say it in Polish, but she has three scars on her face like this. This is Urzuli Danto. This is the Urzuli Frida is the Rada, is the passive side, the family-oriented side, the peaceful side. And this is Danto is of the Petro, which are the two major nations. And she is born of the Haitian experience, the slave experience. So there's hot, she's angry, she's passionate, and she's got three scars on her face. And she's the patron saint of the Haitian Revolution. She will do the patron saint of motherhood also. She would defend her child against all odds. And so that's why she's the patron saint of the revolution, because she was out there fighting for her people. These are 4 bottles of Dambala, the serpent. You can see the serpents around St. Patrick. You can see that the egg is the egg of knowledge, the source of wisdom. And I put these 4 because you can see 4 different generations. This is what you would traditionally find. The bead and sequence is the second. This is a fabric with the snake wrapped around it with some beads or tacks put on. And then this is a painted bottle. So the art is alive and flourishing and quite beautiful. Next slide. This is Ogun, the god of war, the god of iron, the god of politics. I say God, spirit. And this is the Veve of St. James the Elder. Next slide. And you can see, I said it was the deity, the spirit of metal. And this is on the chair of the voodoo priest, and it's held in place by 4 pieces of metal. So they recognize what symbols are affiliated or associated with this particular spirits. Next. This is obviously Clinton, and I took this was obviously a few years ago, but that's St. George, right? Slaying the dragons. But that's Ogun. That's the spirit of politics, and I took that to my voodoo priest, and he knew exactly who it was and put it in his home for. So it doesn't matter the image. It matters what the image represents. Next slide. This is Gedi, the deity of death. This is a big family. He's dressed in a top hat. Purple and black are his colors. Next slide. And you can see he's wearing sunglasses. The lens is out of this one, and he's got the lens in the other one. That's so he can see into the earth, the visible and the invisible, the known and the unknown. You can't have a life without death. And so Gedi is a very important figure in Haitian voodoo. Next slide. Where do the spirits live? You know, they live underneath in the water, but they also like to visit spots that are beautiful. This happens to be a grove of bamboo. And so people will visit this and to be in the presence of the deities. Next slide. This is, it's hard to see, but this is a well, or a spring. And Vodou is an earth religion where plants are used for medicines. And so water is extremely important. And this is the, is a sacred spot. And this would be visited by Dambala Wedo, the wife of Dambala, the serpent, because she is a protector of bodies of water. Next slide. This is a body of water that on certain times of the year you would hear drumming in this water. So this is a sacred area, right? Because this is where the spirits reside. Next slide. But it's also whoa! This is also an area where kids can swim, because it's not, even though it's sacred, it's not something that people are to stay away from. This is the profane. It's an area to be used by people. Next slide. Other way. This is the pathway. This is the pathway. This is the Potomidan. Big trees are how the spirits will come up from the great water abyss from Guinea to the land of the living. Next slide. Don't take your finger off. This is Teapot. This is the voodoo priest that I worked with. This is just him sitting behind his altar. Next slide. This is his humpfor. This is his voodoo temple. You can kind of see right here is where his center post is. Next slide. On the inside, they have all a myriad of bottles, and each one of these bottles has an herb, a medicine in it that is used for a particular ailment. He also has divining cards, which is a regular set of cards. He's got a book in the corner. This is a rada. This is a peaceful altar. And there's a difference between the two. Next slide. This is hard to see. This is his book of knowledge. He said, this book contains all that I need to know. It's like, what is the medical book, Virginia, that your dad used? Gray's? And why? Because it has pictures of cells, pictures of body parts in it. And that's the kind of level that these guys are working on. They're working on the invisible, and the cellular structure we can't see, right? And there's a stone that's in here, and that's a divining stone. It's called, it's a tear of God. It was made by the indigenous people, by the Taino people, but that's seen as a tear of God that is used to help him to tell what's wrong with a person. There are no doctors in this area. There are no lawyers in this area. There are no judges in this area. So the voodoo priest works, and or priestess, works in all of these realms to keep society running smoothly. Next slide. This is the petrol. And how do you know it's petrol? Petrol, remember, it's born of the Haitian experience where there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of heat. You can see that there is a chain. And that chain is holding things in place so that spirit can escape out and do some potential harm. Next slide. You can see this is cross, and these are not Christian crosses. These are crosses of the crossroads. The ups and the downs, the visible, the invisible, the known, the unknown. And you can see that this one is, my priest was Met Carfu, which is the legba of the petrol of, it doesn't make any difference. It's too complicated to get into. But he is God of the crossroads of the visible and the invisible. So this is one of his main, but he has to have the ropes tying it down so it doesn't escape. Next slide. This guy he just was known by Mr. He was a voodoo priest that was a little different. The first year I went there, I took a group of students from Syracuse University, and I set them up in houses so they could have a true Haitian experience where they could cook, they could sleep, they could do all the things that a Haitian person does. My student, she had a child with an individual, and this individual put a spell against her, according to her. And in Haiti, every time she shut her eyes, she saw a man in maroon shorts with a machete. And she stayed in a family where this guy, there are compounds, so there are several houses, and this guy was staying there, and that's where he had his temple. And she didn't speak any Creole, they didn't speak any English, but she set up a voodoo ceremony. And so I clearly went because I wanted to know what was going to happen to her. And I mean, he did this expedition against the husband of the child, the father of the child, and the visions ceased in her. So he was quite a powerful man. Next slide. This is his altar. You can see that he has skulls on his altar. And skulls are not this demonic kind of thing, but the skulls are the source of knowledge. And so he had these on the skulls, and these would all actually be turned into medicine. They'd have a grater, and they would grate some of the skull in there, so you would be taking in part of God. Next slide. You know, I talked about voodoo dolls. This is an authentic voodoo doll on his altar. And I told you that it is also a separation of relationships, but it's also a doll that's there for women in childbirth. It's seen as an assistant to helping them birth their child. Next slide. And this is his petrol altar. You can see he's got bones underneath of it. And like I said, everybody works a little differently. And in that vessel above, he would be heating up things. And this is petrol, so it's a hot, and it's born of the Haitian experience. So it's not a passive kind of relationship. Next slide. This is the home of a voodoo follower. How do you know? Because it's got two plants that are on there. Next slide. It's 1201. This is another. You can see this individual has the crosses of the crossroad, the known and the unknown, and the trees. So this is another voodoo follower. Drums are extremely important because that's what keeps the ceremonies where they're supposed to be. Drummers are never possessed. They are always of sound mind, if you will. They're always present, and they control what's taking place. These are the drums that I had made by the last traditional voodoo drum maker in my community. Next slide. This is a bush priest, and back in the Haitian Revolution, they kicked all the French clergy out, and so there are no religious people to carry on any of the rites that needed to be. So this bush priest, they were lay people who came in and formed the rites of Catholic priests. And he is going to be baptizing the drums. Next slide. He serves the same purpose as this Catholic priest who's baptizing our goddaughter. You can see there's Virginia with shorter hair. And you can see that the bush priest is dipping holy water, which will go on the drums. And next slide. As you can see, the same holy water is being put on our goddaughter. Next slide. You can see it's being put on the... because this young man was being baptized at the same time. He is the brother to the drums. So they're both being baptized. Next slide. And there's the oil that's being put on her forehead. Next slide. And then there's a party afterwards. You know, the drums have to be played. They've been a soul has been put on them. And next slide. And it's the same thing with a Haitian baptism. There's a party afterwards to celebrate the baptism of the child. Next slide. This is possession. And possession is when the language of voodoo takes place. This is T-Pop again. He looks, to me, completely different. He's got glasses on, and he's got his cross on, which is, the cross of the visible and the invisible. The glasses help him see into the future and into the past. Next slide. This is at a voodoo ceremony, a Christmas ceremony, and this woman I was talking to, and all of a sudden she hit the ground, and she turned into Dambala, the snake, the serpent. And as you can see, you take on the attributes, because when that spirit arrives, it asks the big guardian angel to leave so it can occupy, and it rides you. I become the horse, and the spirit guides me. And this is what possession is all about. It's not long-lived. It lasts during the ceremony. And this woman started to go around. Next slide. You can see she's starting to curve around the chair. Her body becomes the snake. She's not left alone. This woman here has a beeswax candle and follows her. So she's always They're always taking care of the people who have gone under possession, are being watched. Next slide. This is the same ceremony, so there are different possessions that are taking place. This happens to be the possession of Ogun. How do I know that? It's a red goat with a red scarf wrapped around its body. Next slide. It has a headscarf being put on. Next slide. And it's tethered, and it has a candle on there to keep the light, which is bringing the spirit in. Next slide. This young woman has been spirit possessed by Ogun. How do you know? She's wearing red clothes. Those are the colors of Ogun. And she's got a machete on her side because he's the god of iron, of war. So she's got the machete, which represents that. Next slide. And she mounts the goat, which will be, and she's holding a red chicken in her hands, which they'll be ultimately sacrificed. But it's not a sacrifice. It's just like anybody going out hunting, or if you've grown up on a farm and you wring a chicken's neck. This food will be eaten by the community. Next slide. You know, there's no torment of the goat. I mean, she's riding it, but she is the spirit that has been possessed, and so she's riding the goat. Next slide. This is a zombie. It's hard to see. How do I know she's a zombie for fact? I don't know. But when I ran across her, in this area, I walked wherever I went. And that's the only way that you get to see things, is by walking. And people say, well, where's your car? And I said, I'm getting big college. I have 2 tires, left foot, right foot. Wherever I go, I walk. I'm just like you guys. And this was a woman sitting on the roadside, and I'd never seen her before, and I asked, nobody had ever seen her before. And people just don't wander around. And she said, Mo yung zombie, I'm a zombie. I'm broke, I don't have anything. So I gave her some money. But you look into a person's eyes, and you can see when there's life and vitality in them, because they kind of glisten. And you can look into somebody's eyes when there's nothing there, where they're just kind of dead. That's the way her eyes were. Next slide. And there's a society that deals with zombies. It's called the Bazongo Society. And they're there for law and order. There's no law and order in the countryside. There's no police in the countryside. Up until, in the late 90s, it was still controlled by the military. And so the only way, and they didn't show up. And so the only way that you could keep control over your society was to have a police force in place. And that was the Bazongo Society. And if you did something wrong, they would come and they say, you're not following the values, the mores of our village. Please stop. And if they didn't, they would be visited again. And on the 3rd time, it's a charm, right? They would be turned into a zombie. And a zombie this is the zombie kokoma, zombie cucumber. Next slide. And this is the pufferfish, which is, has the poison in it. And they give this potion to this person because they haven't obeyed the rules of the society. And what are you without rules? There has to be some way to keep that person in check. And so there are a couple of identifiable cases of voodoo. Most of them are not, but there have been a couple that where they have documentation, death certificates, and that kind of stuff. So these are the moving parts of voodoo. And if you take away anything from voodoo, voodoo is just like any other religion. It's there to serve the purposes of the people who are the devotees. It's the same thing as this congregation. What do you want answered? They just want what everybody does. And this is these are the faces of voodoo. They are people just like everybody else. They're not evil, possessed maniacs. They're just people who are practicing a way of life that suits them, that fits their needs, that has been in their blood, if you will, in their DNA for over 8,000 years. These are all people within in the compound of the voodoo priest. This is the oldest daughter. That's the youngest son. And these are twins. Twins are extremely powerful force in voodoo. It's like having two souls in one. My oldest goddaughter, Tipapet, is a twin, and she kind of rules the roost. And this is the bush priest at the market. happy that one, remembered him and recognized him for what he did. Because a lot of this stuff is, outsiders. It's just fun and games kind of thing. And the last picture, this is the voodoo priest T-Pop playing music. This is the first time that I met him, and he got out his drums, and this is the drum maker, the last traditional drum maker, his father. And he put on a drumming ceremony for us.
You should tell them where the drums are.
Over the years, I collected Haitian art, Haitian voodoo art, flags and bottles and the drums and all. And I've never had a place where I've been able to store them. When Virginia and I got married, most of them were in the basement because there's no room in the house for them. And so we moved here, and there's no room for them, so I gave them all to the Folk Art Museum in Santa Fe. So the whole collection is together. Hopefully they don't sell it off, because museums tend to do that. But they're all in Santa Fe. May never see the light of day, but they're there and they're safe and they're taken care of.
What is the training the priests go through?
Well, there's an apprenticeship where you will work like this is his father, right? And so there was an apprenticeship. He was a priest as well. So there was an apprenticeship between the two of them. And so you're learning the ways. But then it's up to you, because you will have different spirits within you. He has Metcalfu, which is God of the Crossroads. He has Loa Blah, the white Loa. And so these spirits will also tell you how to set up your altar. Because they're the collective energy of many different deceased individuals, of the great guardian angel. And so when that collective energy is there and they come forth, they talk to you. They tell you what you want to do. Voodoo is that democratic, where you don't have to sit and listen to a preacher tell you what to do. You're listening to God, him or herself, because they have inhabited you. So it's that direct connection where you don't have to necessarily always have an intermediary. Does that make sense a little bit? And so these are just common everyday people that are just trying to make it through life like the rest of us. And that's all I have. I'm sorry I went over a little too long, Joe.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bill.